Good morning, everyone. Lots going on as usual. Today is Sunday, October 12th, the day before Thanksgiving, but Thanksgiving weekend. I hope that you're having a good Thanksgiving weekend. I am having issues with Rumble, but I think that Rumble is actually having problems of its own. I can't connect to the streaming platform either. There's issues happening all over the place, but I appear to be okay streaming on YouTube and X. So we'll try that this morning, and I'll upload as usual to Spotify and all the other places. It's just a really strange thing that's going on. Thanks for confirming on the chat there that things are okay. If it's not okay, I'm going to just upload it later. So if the stream starts really struggling or something like that, let me know and I'll just kill it. But it's a weird thing that's going on today. Anyway, I wanted to do trade with China, EVs, canola, and more. It's going to be an interesting thing because this is pairing off with Trump starting a war with China, an economic war with China. And we're going to see if that actually comes to fruition maybe tomorrow morning. We'll see. Who knows? It seems like China and Trump are at an impasse, and Trump is just not going to let it go. So we'll see. We'll see. I don't know what's going to happen with that one. Baber's C9 and the changing of definition of hate speech from the Supreme Court definition to this new legal definition, and he's wondering about that. I think it's an interesting back and forth, 5 minutes, well worth it. Link will be in the description. But we'll talk about that this morning as well. Something weird's going on with this Nobel Prize. There's something strange happening here, and it's a weird thing, and we've got to talk about it. And I've got a little bit of tabloidy news to start us off. I was struggling thinking of a title, and then I was like, where are we starting today? And I was like, oh yeah, right, that happened. So there's lots to get to. Let's get to it. First, Leah says, Canadian Thanksgiving traces back to explorers like Martin Frobisher and Samuel de Champlain's Order of Good Cheer in 1606. And so in 1606, they had feasts to celebrate and things like that. And she says their feasts for gratitude of survival and boosting morale lay early roots for our holiday this weekend. So I hope you are enjoying the holiday. So lots of things going on, and my gosh, like a really robust show today too, like lots of things happening on the world stage over this holiday weekend in Canada, because it's not really a holiday weekend anywhere else. One of the things that happened is this tabloidy piece of news, and they deserve each other in my opinion. Canada is reporting leaked photo shows Justin Trudeau and Katy Perry kissing on her yacht near Santa Barbara. So my gosh, ridiculous. I thought it was just a ploy to sell tickets, but here we are. Justin Trudeau appears to actually really be dating Katy Perry. Is the stream freezing every so often? It seems like it's freezing every so often. I hope not. It looks good here. Everything looks like it's running well, but I see in the little frame here that it seems to be freezing. Anyway, we have to talk about this Nobel, and it seems very, very strange. This is a breakdown of what Trump and the United States foreign policy is trying to do to break Maduro's hold on Venezuela. Trump says that Maduro is a narco-terrorist, and Venezuela is a narco-terrorist controlled state, and they need to break that terrorist control in order to help them, et cetera, et cetera. But this guy says what Trump's doing is lacking understanding and harming 30 million people. Maybe it's bias as well. But going underground, says Maria Corina Machado was given the Nobel Peace Prize to give her an international spotlight and the credibility, quote, to take over Venezuela after the U.S. overthrows Maduro and puts her in power. Here's Professor Jeffrey Sachs on the brutality of the U.S. campaign against Venezuela. And here's the post I showed you yesterday. 2025 Nobel Prize winner Maria Corina Machado once wrote to Israeli war criminal Benjamin Netanyahu and asked him for help to overthrow Venezuela's president Nicolas Maduro. And then in 2025, she gets a Nobel. Weird, right? Here's Colonel Towner, and he says, is anyone surprised a CIA operative in Venezuela gets a Peace Prize? So is this person a CIA operative? Maybe, right? So pretty wild stuff. Here's President Trump, and he says, the opposition leader in Venezuela called me. Very classy lady. Here we go.
The person who actually got the Nobel Prize called me and said, I'm accepting this in honor of you because you really deserved it. That a very nice thing to do. I didn't say then give it to me though. I think she might have. She was very nice, and I've been helping her along the way. They need a lot of help in Venezuela. It's a basic disaster. So, and you could also say it was given out for 24, and I was running for office in 24. All of the transactions that we did in terms of closing, but there are those that say we did so much that they should have done it, but I don't take. I'm happy because I saved millions of lives, many millions of lives. And speaking of somebody that saves lives, don't ever play golf with it because Keegan Bradley just walked in, one of the greatest golfers in the world.
What? That's a weird pivot there, Mr. Trump. So is the plan, and there are people who think that the plan is for the United States to take over Venezuela. And if you have this Nobel Peace Prize winning person waiting in the wings, see the mistake they made with Guido. The Guido thing was under Biden. The G7 was backing it, and it stank to high heaven. It glowed from here. I could see the glowing from my house. It was ridiculous, right? Everybody was like, you can't just overthrow a state and put in your preferred person just because you don't like this person. They didn't have the narco-terrorism angle. And if they did have it, they weren't telling anybody about it. They just wanted Maduro gone, and they wanted Guido to be the leader. And so now Trump's come in and said, okay, we've just got to frame this right. Frame it this way. Give this person a Nobel Peace Prize. Bingo, bango, bongo. The whole world will be behind the Peace Prize winning person taking over Venezuela, the Trump-loving Peace Prize woman taking over Venezuela, right? That's what they want. And so it's just selling a narrative, selling a story. It's pretty wild, and people are going to fall for it. People are going to love it, right? Trump endorses this woman. Trump's working with this woman. Oh my, holy smoke, right? We're gonna save Venezuela, make Venezuela great again for the CIA, right? So I don't know, man. It just stinks to me. It just seems like there's red flags here. No, I think there's red flags here. Unusual Whales says, moving on just a bit, we've got trade incidents happening across the world. So yesterday I told you that Trump said China has made this move as of November 1st. They're going to be doing all sorts of stuff. And as the sitting president, I can't not respond. I'm going to respond, and we're going to do tariffs, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do that. And so China has responded to Trump's response. And that response is, Unusual Whale says, China warns the United States of countermeasures if Trump does not walk back 100% tariff threat. So mutually assured economic destruction. Oh, that would have been a good title. Oh, well. It is one of those situations where when Trump initially brought in the sanctions against China, and then Temu and all of these other internet drop shipping places started to go tits up, that was an indication. And then Trump backed off. That was an indication that didn't work, right? And so sometimes you got to pressurize the system to see where the leaks are. And is this going to be averted before tomorrow morning at market open? People were talking yesterday about a black swan event, maybe a situation where these tariffs are enacted, or China counters, or something to that effect. The market is supposed to hit a circuit breaker as soon as it opens. I don't know, but people are worried about this, and we'll see. We'll see. All we can do is wait and potentially enjoy the turkey today, right? Here's CBC Watcher, and this is bringing the China trade discussions home. CBC Watcher says China's ambassador to Canada, Wang Di, says, quote, if Canada removes the unilateral unjustified tariffs on Chinese products, like EVs, China will also reciprocate accordingly. And if the EV tariffs are removed, then China will also remove the tariffs on the relevant products of Canada. And so this is, China will remove, CTV News is reporting yesterday, China will remove canola tariffs if Canada scraps the EV levies, says the ambassador. So is this right at harvest time? Is this like the opportune moment to remove the tariffs and everybody goes back to business as usual? Or what, right? And how does this play in the backdrop of the U.S.-China conflict? who does Canada choose, right? So the timing of this is not an accident, I don't think. Wab Canoe says tariffs on EVs shouldn't cost our families their livelihoods. Time for a trade that works for the prairies and for all Canadians. We want to sell our canola. We want to sell our canola to China at full price, and we want to sell our canola to China at full price. Right meow. That's what he's saying. And so that's the argument. Take the tariffs off the EVs. China can dump their EVs here. Canadians can buy the EVs. We can find out why it's such a terrible idea. I'm not sure that we will. Food Professor weighs in on this thing, and he's responding to himself. And the headline is, Dear Ottawa, you can't eat an electric vehicle. China is handing Canada a solution on a silver platter to end the trade dispute hurting our farmers. Time for Ottawa to grow up geopolitically and act in the national interest. And yeah, I don't know. He says if Prime Minister Carney is as smart as many Canadians believe, if you watch this show, you know I don't think that Mark Carney is very intelligent. I don't think that he could go toe to toe with Joe Rogan. I don't think he'd have 3 hours of things to talk about that would be interesting, right? I just don't. I don't. It's interesting. It's interesting when people who you think are really layered and have a lot to talk about peter out after an hour. It's like, okay, well, I guess there's nothing else to talk about. See you later. And then people who you don't really expect would have a whole lot to say. You find, holy cow, you're an expert on your thing. Like there was a guy who did a thread on llamas. And I was like, wow, I didn't know any of that about, or camels. It was camels, the camel guy, right? And so you find out these things. And if you love your topic, it can be an interesting 3 hours that disappears in like 30 seconds, right? Robert Schoch, right? Schoch is the Egyptologist. He was a cartographer, or he was a rock guy. He was not an Egyptologist at first, and he was just somebody who looked at how water erodes rocks and what water does to surfaces and structures over time. And they said, you got to come and look at the Sphinx. These Egyptologists talked him into coming and looking at the Sphinx. And he was like, and they said, how old is that thing? And he said, oh, like super old, really, really old. Like you can tell because of the nose and so on and so forth. And so he brought insight that the Egyptologists were unable to see because they were locked into their ideology. Anyway, that was an interesting 3 hours, but it's interesting when people don't have anything. And I don't think Mark Carney has anything. I don't think he's deep at all, right? He might be able to talk about Brookfield, but even then, I don't think he'd be an engaging speaker. It wouldn't be interesting. Mark Carney says he spoke with Zelensky. This is weird. This is a strange kind of turn of events. At 3 o'clock, 2:54 p.m. yesterday, Mark Carney says, I spoke with Zelensky earlier after yesterday's abhorrent Russian attack on Ukraine's energy grid, which left thousands of Ukrainians without power. Canada will support Ukraine's defense of critical infrastructure. Alongside our coalition partners, Canada remains committed to providing military and financial support for Ukraine and to increasing pressure on Russia to end its unjust war of aggression. And so that's not good, right? And I don't think that we should be supporting foreign wars, but my position on that is well known if you watch this show. So I just don't think we should be supporting foreign wars. I just don't think it's a good idea. And then here is what happened yesterday in Ukraine. Russia News is reporting Zelensky bombs a shopping center in Russia's Donetsk just hours after a phone call with Trump. Market erupts in flames after Ukrainian drone strike with casualties still unknown. Expect fierce condemnation from the White House and Brussels once Russia responds. So this war still seems to be raging on, and Canada is saying, we got to support Ukraine. And indeed, like Russia, this is reporting by Russia, so take it with a grain of salt. I don't know. This is Russia News, right? So it's Mog Rush. The account is Russian, it looks like. And so again, take it with a grain of salt with the framing, et cetera, et cetera. But the fact that the conflict is still raging, I don't think we should be involved. I think the only reason the conflict is still raging is because Western money is infusing it and continuing it. And I think we should stop. And I just don't think that it's, NATO shouldn't be trying to onboard Ukraine. Ukraine shouldn't be in the position that it's in. That has been a long agreed upon position since the 90s, as far as I understand it. And what changed in 2014 and all of the things that have happened since, and all of the biolabs and all of the rest of the things that happen around Ukraine, it's all such a muddy mess that I don't think that we have any right to pretend our poop don't stink and to pretend that we we get to decide what happens in Ukraine. Because why? Look, what's the rationale here? We spent a lot of money on it. Like, have you ever been in a poker hand that you really thought you should win, and when the cards turn up, like, oh shit, I'm out how much money? I was counting all that money to be coming back to me. That was going to be my money, and all of the money in the middle was going to be my money too. Nuh-uh, right? It's not ours. We don't have any kind of right to it at all. We've just pushed all our money in the middle, and somebody's going to collect it all up, but it sure as heck is not going to be us, okay? Let's talk about free speech. We're losing. We're losing no matter what happens with Ukraine. We've already lost. That money's gone, and we've just got to eat that. Like, that's just gone. It's just gone. We've already lost, and the job now is to stop the bleeding, to stop the more loss, because if you try and get money, if you try and get stuff back from that, you're just going to go insane. I guess unless you're Trump, he's able to extract money from bad situations. He's able to turn things around. So maybe if you had a strategy, but if you don't have a strategy, you got to move forward. JJ McCullough, let's talk about free speech. JJ McCullough, how much time? 15? Okay, 15 minutes, we're good. JJ McCullough says, your average Canadian has no idea how much their free expression rights have been stripped away in the name of making election campaigns, quote, fair. If you can't publicly express your own political opinions on your own property, then what good is freedom of speech? I hope he sues. Yeah, for real, this idea, you can't call a communist a communist. If they say, I'm a socialist, and you say all of the things that you're doing align with communist policies, the reality here is you're a communist. That's somehow, you can be fined for that. This guy who's a Lululemon founder and a billionaire, I don't know, billionaire, whatever it is, lots of money. He has this sign, EB will tell you the conservatives are far right, but neglects saying that the NDP is communist. And he even has communist in quotes. And so he's being fined for that? What if the internet is treated as if every post is a sign like this on your property? How can that stand any kind of legal pressure? Because we have the ability to have free expression. We have the ability to have free expression during an election. We have the ability to have free expression not during an election. We have the ability to say what we think, and that's God-given. That's not government regulated. And it's one of those things that if we allow this to stand, if they say, oh yeah, you can say whatever you want, but the consequences of that is you have $1 million fine. Here's your $1 million fine. That's intolerable. That's not a situation that is free speech. That is, we will economically destroy you for speech we don't like. And that's not the same thing. And so, man, people do not understand how dangerous this is. And this does, I don't know if this sets a precedent, but I'm sure there's going to be a legal challenge. I hope there's a legal challenge. So we'll see. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. We'll see how that all plays out. Here is, oh my gosh, everything's going wrong on this series of tabs here. It's a comedy of errors. Okay. Roman Babber, he says, on Thursday, I got to drill the Department of Justice officials on Bill C-9, the hate speech bill. They're exposed. Watch. The whole video is worth watching. Here's just a little bit of it, a minute, maybe a minute and a half, maybe 2 minutes. Here we go.
Ms. Breeze, have you reviewed the Supreme Court's definition of the phrase hatred in advance of drafting Bill C-9? Yes or no?
Yes.
The Supreme Court's definition of hatred includes the words emotion of an intense and extreme nature. Why have you dropped those words from your proposed definition of Bill C-9?
Thank you for the question. The definition reflects or captures the body of Supreme Court of Canada jurisprudence on the definition of hatred. The extreme and intense description is captured by the words vilification and detestation, as the minister had pointed out earlier. It is also clear that it is stronger than disdain and dislike. And so the definition, the intent is to capture the Supreme Court of Canada jurisdiction by indicating the high threshold of what is hatred and the narrow scope of it.
I don't agree with you that you can have a disdain or a dislike that it's not necessarily extreme in nature or not intense in nature. And I also note that the definition is conjunctive. It's both intense and extreme, something that the Supreme Court has clearly articulated and is still good case law today. Were you instructed by the minister or any political staff to drop the words intense and extreme nature from the definition?
MP Baber, so thank you for the question. We want to be very clear on what the government's perspective is, and certainly,
please go ahead.
Have heard the concerns that you've expressed.
The question was: Have you been instructed by the minister or any of his staff to drop the words intense and extreme nature from the definition?
No, and the government's position in what it is advancing in the definition is intended to reflect the Supreme Court jurisprudence. That is what we are seeking to do.
You can have an intense and extreme nature for a positive emotion. You could be happy in a very intense and extreme nature. You could love a loved one intensely. So I would not necessarily say that just because you use two different words, such as disdain, that you necessarily meet the high threshold articulated by the Supreme Court. I'd like to go back to your point.
We'll just leave it there. So almost 3 minutes. Sorry, it takes so much time, and I think that it's happening so fast, right? It's important that they're changing these definitions and taking these words out, and the fact that Baber's getting to that nitty gritty is interesting, and really holding the guy to account is good. People are saying they were able to block Bill C2, and they removed some of the provisions of C2, the snooping and the opening mail. But I heard that they're going to put it into C12 and try and get that through too. So if they split these bills, if they remove these bad parts of these bills, then maybe the Conservatives do have a strategy. I still haven't seen the strategy. I'm trying to understand the strategy because I want to understand the strategy so I can tell you and then critique the strategy. So far it seems messy and not cohesive, not coordinated, not focused. It doesn't seem like there's a focused strategy to do anything other than to fight with the Liberals on Twitter and support them mostly in the House of Commons. Bill C2, again, they got broken up. But I fear once they open these doors, they're going to go whole hog. They're going to go and arrest people and then say, oh, well, we didn't know. And like the UK is doing that. They they went too far. And the courts are not backing it up. Lucy Connolly didn't serve her 30 months. And so all sorts of things are happening. Pushback is happening. I wish I understood it more broadly so I could explain it to you and critique it better. Here we go.
Mr. Speaker,
this is Matt Strauss, and we already listened to the second half of this, but it's worthwhile listening to the beginning of this. This is from a few days ago, and this tweet is talking about, Vesper says, this is all, the quote you'll hear, he's talking about, I think it's C8 or C9, and his deep concern for the bill, and he goes through and he says, it gets worse, Mr. Speaker, it gets worse. So you'll recognize it once you get to the part where I've already played it, but here we go.
Speaker, when I read this bill for the first time, my jaw hit the floor. As I had previously discussed in this House, my motivation for signing up to become a politician was the violation of basic charter rights that the Liberals perpetrated in the last Parliament. And even with that background in mind, I had hoped that they perhaps had been chastened and they would not try so hard to claim onto themselves powers explicitly forbidden by our Constitution in this Parliament. But I was wrong. And before I start talking about this bill today, let me just say, Mr. Speaker, it has been shocking to listen to Liberals claim to defend charter rights when they themselves violated Section 2 and Section 8 of our charter when they imposed the Emergencies Act, and that was determined by Justice Mosley of the Federal Court. All the Liberal members in the last Parliament voted to do that, and I do not want to hear any more about defending charter rights from any such member who has not apologized for that violation. Now on to the present bill. I am concerned, as I say, by the following sections. 15.1 and 15.2 give the minister the unprecedented, incredible power to kick any private Canadian citizen off the internet, to cut off their phone line, to turn off their cell phone. That is the plain language summary, but I will quote now the bill in its legalese. If there is reasonable grounds to believe that it is necessary to do so to secure the Canadian telecommunication system against any threat, the minister may prohibit a telecommunication service provider from providing any service to the specified person. Now, perhaps this might make sense to do in an extreme circumstance if a person is trying to cause our satellites to crash or to jam military radar. But this section does not use language about extreme threats of physical damage or threats to national security. It says any threat. And as far as I can tell, given the Liberals' incautious and bombastic use of terms like misinformation, that being any information they don't like, or existential threat, for instance, the member from Milton called the leader of my party an existential threat to our democracy, which is, of course, bananas. So given their incautious and bombastic use of these phrases, it seems to me that the industry minister could deem any speech she doesn't like any threat, and then kick that person off the internet. This section reaches Chinese Communist Party levels of government overreach, and they should be ashamed of themselves.
And that's not even understating it. He's got it, but it gets worse. And there's 2 more minutes of it gets worse. So, and we've listened to that before. Here's CBC watcher. Carney has asked, I'm curious, are you comfortable with the notion that police or intelligence can go to any service provider? It could be doctors, counselors, child therapists, pharmacists, and obtain information about if someone is a client, since when, where they obtain those services without a warrant. Carney, and when it is merited, there's probable cause, possible expectation, potential illegal trafficking of, for example. And this is the case, unfortunately, in our society of precursors and components of fentanyl, which kills thousands of Canadians every year. Carney is trading your privacy rights under the guise of fixing a problem that the Liberals created, a free flow and use of illegal drugs that are killing Canadians. So they're saying we have to have this bill where Canadians are being asked, do you provide these services to this person for how long, et cetera, et cetera? And I'm concerned it could be anybody, right? Like lawyers, doctors, pharmacists, and so on. Police can go and ask these people these questions. They have to answer, as far as I understand it, without a warrant. And that's not safety. That is tyranny. And I think we have to leave it there for the stream. Oh, we've got one more. We've got one more here. We'll do this one. Vicky says, when citizens march, they're far right. When mobs riot, they're activists. Welcome to modern Britain. A group of British men and women marched through Falkirk with Union Jacks and Salteers, I'm getting that wrong, sorry, peacefully, legally, and under police supervision to protest mass immigration and the housing of asylum seekers in local hotels. And suddenly, the media loses its mind. Masked mob, they scream, as if Falkirk had just been invaded by an army of extremists rather than frustrated taxpayers. Funny, isn't it? When Stand Up to Racism shouts through megaphones and blocks roads, it's called community solidarity. When locals dare to question why their town's hotels are being filled with illegal migrants instead of paying guests, it's hate. The same journalists who weep about democracy can't handle the sight of ordinary people waving their own flag. Union Jacks, intimidating. Palestinian flags, empowering. Here's the truth. The Falkirk protesters aren't thugs. They're citizens who are tired of being ignored, patronized, and smeared by the very politicians who created this crisis. If demanding a secure border makes one far right, then perhaps the center has finally collapsed, buried under decades of political cowardice and media spin. The people of Falkirk didn't march against humanity. They marched for it, for safety, sovereignty, and a country that still belongs to its people. And with that, we'll say goodbye to the stream. Thanks for watching, everybody, and have a happy Thanksgiving. And we'll talk to you tomorrow. Everybody's off tomorrow, right? It's not just some people are off tomorrow. Tomorrow's Thanksgiving? Okay. We'll see you tomorrow. For everybody else, we will carry on as soon as I make sure the stream is stopped. Do I have to do that on here? Sorry, everybody. Today I couldn't log into Rumble. Do I have to end the stream?